it's underground. Imagine the level being up here. Or for storage, grain, olive oil, water, sometimes, yes.
Like a place to set the jars.
When this was built, nobody knew it as the Parthenon. It was simply the Temple of Athena. That's a name that started being given to the temple afterwards. Pericles did not know it as a Parthenon. Parthenos in Greek is a virgin. That's why I have the term parthenogenesis, virgin birth. And the building is called Parthenon, the house of the virgin, because Athena, to whom it was dedicated, was a virgin goddess. Because she's the goddess of wisdom. The whole idea is this. She did not need anybody in her life. She was perfect by herself. Many things in Greek mythology or in Greek religion were born by the combination of different things. For example, when the god of war met the goddess of love, what was born was strife or jealousy. And Athena, she's perfection by herself, needs no contributions. There's always going to be a maiden. So this is a house of the maiden in the end. It's a building that follows the golden ratio. Everything is 9 divided 4. There's the length by the width, or the width by the height is always 9 divided 4. But the one thing that makes it so special is, apart from being built by free men paid for their job, is this. We have these optical illusions became a parameter of architecture for the first, and some of them for the only time in history. What I mean is this. Greek temples, the design is basically simple. We have a rectangular base, straight line, columns in right angles to support the roof. Inside there's always a chamber, so the columns are all around to support the larger roof, if you like. But the architects working here had noticed that if you look at a colonnade from a certain distance, you usually have the impression that the whole thing is kind of curving upwards, like this. Next time you see a Greek temple, or if you go to a country with lots of arcades, etc., like an example is Santa Mark Square in Venice, with all the colonnade. If you look at it from a distance, it always looks like this. It's like the colonnade, even though it's built in a straight line, it's kind of swerving. It's just an illusion, it's not happening, it's how we perceive it. So the whole idea of the architects here, if something built in a straight line looks like this, maybe if we build it like this, it's going to look like this. So this one does not have a single straight line, or if you like, there's not a single column in a right angle with a base. It all goes like this, and like this. From the corner to the middle is 6 centimeters raised. On the long sides, again, it's 11 centimeters raised. So every single stone goes like this and like this. The other thing that I thought about was that when you're standing in front of a tall building, you have the impression that it's kind of leaning. There's a feeling we have with the skyscrapers. You know they're going up, but it seems they're kind of bending. So they decided to give an inclination towards the center to all the columns and the walls, not to scare the visitors. So the corner column here, for example, is a column that goes like this and like this at the same time. So if you trace 4 lines from the 4 corner columns here and up to the sky, around the height of 6,000 meters, they meet. So this would be the base of a pyramid at the same time being all curved. Now the third thing that I thought about, which we cannot check right now because you're on the back side, you can check it on sunset, is that when you have the sun changing, the sun moving, you also have the shade of the column shifting. So there are some parts of the day, for example, sunset in this side, the first row of columns is completely in the sun. The second row of columns is partially hidden by the first one. So usually when you compare a column in the sun with a column that's partially hidden, you have the feeling that the second one is slightly thinner than the other. So in order to avoid this feeling, they decided to alter the thickness of every single column just to give this feeling that everything is exactly the same. Sometimes they simply change it by a mere millimeter. Now the 4 corner columns are actually thicker than the rest, just to give this feeling of sturdiness to the building. So basically all these things are not done for any architectural reason, it's simply for the sake of the eye. And I think these are the 3 things we don't find in the National Parthenon. 2 other things are also important, which were kind of common throughout Greek architecture at the time. The first one is this. You see that the columns, the more they go up, the thinner they become. So you expect the thickest part to be at the base, but it's not. Actually, the thickest part of every single column here is around 2/5 of the height. So they go like this. They start to get thicker and then they get thinner, much thinner. It's kind of squashed out. And that would they would do that for purely psychological reasons. The idea is this. So this is a stone roof and you expect it to be heavy. If you put underneath a row of columns that's kind of tapering, you have the feeling that the whole thing is kind of fragile. So you expect the thing to squash out a bit. You squash it out ourselves, our peace of mind. That was the whole idea. Then the last thing has to do with the triglyphs. Now, fortunately, I have a scaffolding, it's kind of difficult to see, but what we call triglyph is those three vertical lines you see over the columns that look like a Kit Kat piece, Kit Kat chocolate piece. Just look at the first row over the columns, plain stone. At the second row, you see there are square slabs with battle seats, and in between two square slabs, there's always three vertical lines like this. If you look at them, even though they're damaged, you can tell they are identical. They do have the same width and the same height. Now, if you look at the square slabs, you'll see that, we'll just focus on the shape, they'll look like perfect squares, but they're not. And the only way to tell it from here is by doing this. The other side is easier today, because you put the scaffold in there is where the man is. You'll notice that every single triangle is either above the center of a column, or the center of a space between two columns. But if you look carefully behind the scaffolding, especially over there, you'll see that the last triangle is pushed to the side. There's something up there that's uneven. For the Greeks, the idea was that we want to close a corner of a temple with two triangles touching like this, or like this on both sides. But we wanted to do it in a way that nobody from here can perceive that the slabs are there slightly different in width. The other thing that makes this building important is the sculptural decoration. And most of what, not most, all that we see today is replicas. The original pieces are either here in the British Museum, for the most part. So they decided to replace the remaining real ones with replicas because of pollution, acid rain, etc. Everything was deteriorating quite fast. So we're standing on the back side. This is a side that has the most pictures in the world, but it's the back side. Whenever you see a Greek temple, you don't have to wonder. For the most part, they're east-west. Entrance always to the east for one practical reason. If they had windows, they were so narrow that they needed light coming from that direction. The Greek temples are not like the temples of other religions. It's not that important to them. Greek religion is an outdoors religion. The important thing is the altar, the sacrifice. You kill the animal, you cook it, you share the meal, something goes to the gods in the form of smoke, etc. But the building is simply to protect the cult statue. So it's nothing like the temple in Jerusalem where there was a section you were not even allowed to go. So you can replace it, you can reshape it, you can demolish it, etc. On the back side, on the triangle up there on the Parthenon, you used to have the fight between Athena and Poseidon, who was going to be the patron god of the city. Athena won, that's why the city is Athens and not Poseidonia. On the front side was another story, the birth of the goddess from the head of Zeus. That was a quite strange story because Zeus one day had this terrible headache, and one of the gods came there not with an aspirin but with an axe. He split his skull in two. From there sprang up Athena. Athena was already born inside him, fully armed as a grown-up woman, and she was using her spear to thump at his head because she wanted to get out. The whole idea was this: wisdom comes from the head of the supreme of the gods. The story goes that Zeus had swallowed one goddess of justice, who was pregnant by him. So she's also daughter of justice. And the idea of being a grown-up woman in arm is that wisdom is always mature and mobilized. It's always perfect from day one. All the other gods were looking amazed at this side. Now, on the second row, we see the person working there. We have this square slabs that depict Greeks fighting Amazons. Now, in this particular battle, the Greeks win. You know, the Amazons sometimes would cut their breasts to make sure the bow case was not hindered. On that side, we had Greeks fighting centaurs. The Greeks win. On this side, it was Greeks fighting Trojans. Yes, the Greeks win again. And on the front side had another thing. The gods of the Greeks, that is, Zeus and family, fighting the giants, who are also gods, but of an older and evil generation. The interesting thing with that myth, the gigantomachy, is this. They say that Zeus used his thunderbolt to incinerate most of them, that's how he won. From that ash, he made the first man. So the Greeks always said that man was created by God, not the earth, but the ash. And they also said that since he's partly from a divine creature, he's immortal, part of him, that is, his soul is immortal. And they also believe that man is evil by nature. So you do have the sin, even as a baby. You're born with it. Now, on the second row of columns, you see all these horsemen there. That was a great Parthenon procession. Remember I told you that every 4 years there was this big festival, the birthday of the goddess? Imagine maidens weaving for months a dress that was so huge it was used as a sail on a ship. The ship was put on wheels and the whole city followed in a procession up to the point the high priest would give the gift, the dress, to the statue of the goddess. So you had every single Athenian taking part, the young and the old, the poor and the rich, the commoners and the aristocrats. What we're missing completely was the masterpiece. You have to keep in mind that the architects were Ictinus and Callicrates, but the overseer of everything was Phidias. Phidias is one of the top sculptors of all times. Later on, he built a statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the 7 wonders of the world. He came out with a statue here that was 12 meters in height, Athena, made of gold and ivory, what we call a chryselephantine statue. There is skin parts and face made of ivory, all the rest made of gold. 1,140 kilos of gold. Athena had a spear, a shield, a big snake coiling around. She had an extended arm. The open palm was a Nike 6 feet tall, crowning her. Interesting thing, the pedestal had the birth of Pandora. We know the story of Pandora's box. Greek mythology says that since man had sinned, Zeus created the first woman and gave it to him as a punishment. Now the punishment was actually the famous box. It was actually a jar sealed with all the evil things inside. The order was do not open it, but out of sheer disobedience or curiosity she did. And this is how we have all the evil things spread in our lives, but she managed to close it just in time for the last thing to remain, that was hope. The interesting thing with this myth, which is one of the oldest, is this. God decided to put one thing to test us, and we failed. And we did not need to do that at all. It was women that did it first and men followed too, but both of them were held accountable for one simple reason. Marriage is the one institution that predates the fall. But the interesting thing is, it is always hope. The whole myth reminds you the words that you will crush his head, but he'll pierce your heel. Greeks believed that man and woman used to be united into a single body in the very beginning. 2 heads, 4 arms, 4 legs, credit card in the pocket of the man. That's a recent discovery. They grew so much in power and arrogance that they decided to reach the heavens, but not by building a tower, but by scaling Mount Olympus. That's when Zeus got angry, split them in 2, he spread it all around the world. That's the Tower of Babel for the ancient Greeks. That's how the Greeks explain the urge to get married. You want to reinstitute the original creature. Now, this is all that has to do with this building. What happened is that after the 5th century was a temple dedicated to the goddess of wisdom, Athena. Later on, it became a church dedicated to the wisdom of God. It became an Hagia Sophia. The interesting thing is that when churches the buildings started being dedicated, we never had saint the Virgin Mary in the beginning. In the first centuries, it was always attributes of God. So here we had a wisdom of God. Later on, it became the biggest Orthodox church in the city, dedicated to the, I would use the Orthodox terminology, the Mother of God. We're talking about Mary. And when the 4th Crusade came here, the Crusaders, there was this family from Burgundy, they were called De la Roche. They built a bell tower in the corner, and this was transformed into the Catholic Cathedral of Athens, known as the Notre Dame d'Athènes, Our Lady of Athens, dedicated to the Virgin Mary. 200 years later, the Ottomans came here, the bell tower became a minaret, the church became a mosque. And by the time they demolished the Temple of Athena Nike because they were expecting the Venetian attack, this was used as a gunpowder magazine. Most of the sculptures are up there. A great part of them has been destroyed on purpose when it was turned to a church, kind of destroying the old pagan elements of the building. But for the most part, the building, actually, the whole building was there except for the roof, which was the roof of the church by that time. The Turks used it as a gunpowder magazine, and the Venetians in 1687, bombing the place, they actually hit the powder here. So the bomber shell pierced the roof, landed among the gunpowder battle. So this is why we see it in this condition. If you look at the columns, you can still see markings from cannon fire. The Venetians were the first that tried to take down the sculptures. They fell down, they broke into millions of pieces, they decided to leave the rest there. And then it was in 1802 that Lord Elgin, the British ambassador to Constantinople, to Istanbul, decided to take permission to draw or copy whatever he liked. Eventually he bribed the commander here, he removed the best preserved parts, more than half of them, and he brought them to England. The interesting thing is that in the 19th century was the West always using the excuse that we are taking these things from the East because people here do not appreciate them, or you're better protected in the West. That's how all the big museums are for, whether it's the British or the Louvre or the Nature on the Met, etc. Truth is, when it comes to the Parthenon, the biggest destruction was always done by Westerners. The Italians, out of all people, the people who have probably the best appreciation of these things, were the ones that created the most damage. And then the British. The Ottomans, in the end, were the ones that protected it, because this is the personal property of the Sultan. You cannot, no, worse, his mother. You cannot touch it. The whole thing about being protected in England is kind of something that one of the 3 ships carrying the marble there, transporting it, sunk. And then the British were appalled by what Lord Elgin did. And nobody nobody had the money to buy them, because in 1802 the British were running the continental blockade against Napoleon. So there was no money for that. Eventually they ended up in the British Museum later, and we usually have to go through 10 minutes I read about the British Museum. We had 2 excuses so far for the British Museum for not returning the marbles back. The one is you don't have a suitable museum, that's why they built a new one. Excuse number 1 is gone. The second about the marbles being protected was also demolished a few years ago when we discovered what happened before World War II, when they decided to clean the marble of the statues in a very unprofessional way by using iron brushes, simply scraping off everything. The thing with sculptures is, forget the whiteness. This building was not white. None of these buildings, none of the ancient Greek or Roman buildings was white. You had white columns, yes, but the capitals would have been probably blue. The triangles would have been blue. Every single sculpture would have been painted with the bright colors, and the walls were deep red. How many times have you seen a stone statue with a blind stare? It's because the iris was painted, and it simply faded away. Now, that's something I did not know when they decided to clean the marble. They thought it should be shiny white. That's why they went on like this, and unfortunately the piece they took as the best preserved ones are the worst preserved.